Hello, friends. This is the AlphaList podcast. I am your host, Toby. The goal of the AlphaList podcast is to empower CTOs with the info and insight they need to make the best decisions for their company. We do this by hosting top thought leaders and picking their brains for insights into technical leadership and tech trends. If you believe in the power of accumulated knowledge to accelerate growth, make sure to subscribe to this podcast. Plus, if you're an experienced CTO, you will love the discussion happening in our Slack space where over 600 CTOs are sharing insights, or visit one of our events. Just go to alphalist.com to apply. Welcome to the AlphaList podcast. I am your host, Toby, and today with me is a guy called Klaus Breyer. And Klaus Breyer can talk a lot about silos and moving fast and breaking silos. So the idea for today's episode is to talk about why Agile often turns into mini waterfalls and how we can fix that. And Klaus often does talks about it while in his professional life, acting as a head of product and technology at Edding. I think like everyone in Germany obviously knows Edding. It's a, yes, as I learned yesterday, publicly listed company, mostly known for its pens.
Exactly, yeah.
Not so much for digital things, but you can tell us a bit more. And Klaus built an empowered product and engineering team around a B2B driver license check, which Edding produces or built internally, incubated, right?
Exactly, yeah. It was built internally. When I joined 1.5 years ago, there was already the core technology in place and people selling it quite successfully, but it was never a real product team on this product. And so I did some internal education, like what does it mean to build a digital product inside of a not yet so digital company? I mean, they're continuously improving also their internal digitalization things, but yeah, I did a lot of explanation, and then we hired a product manager and a designer for the first time in the history of this product that at this point already created 5-digit revenue, I must admit. So it already had product market fit. But I made it to one empowered product team. And the product itself, it comes with a quite interesting technology. It's a tool for driver license verification. And the use cases that fleet managers in corporate contexts, at least in Germany, 2 times a year, they need to check if the employees still have a valid driver license, if they drive a company-owned car. And therefore, Edding has developed a very unique technique. And this is basically a label, and it's an invisible label that you can put on your driver license. And this label, I try to show it. You see some of the lines here.
It's compressed away.
Let's see if it's in the podcast. But the name is EasyCheck by Edding. You can also look it up on the homepage. Basically, the idea is the driver licenses, they got an invisible label on it so that you still see everything on the driver license. But on this label, there is an individual code with a conductive ink. And so if you put the driver license on your smartphone and you swipe across, then this code that is in this label with the invisible ink is transferred into the touch screen as touch inputs. And then we can make with machine learning in the background a matching if this is the right code for the right employee who is doing this test in the moment. And but what the code exactly is, this is not obvious to the user. It's only It's only by the matching that we do in the background that we to make it sure that it's the right driver license.
Cool. Magic Inc.
Exactly.
Interesting.
It's an interesting software as a service, especially for Edding, because they are. It's a software as a service, but it's also a product that has to do with ink. So it's a really, really interesting technology.
We're more like interested in how you build empowered software teams, and why you think that software is a design process and not so much an assembly line, which it became in many companies, right?
Exactly.
Like a continuously running monster that where people just chase sprint after sprint, being depressed because they never finish or never achieve something. So you're also one of the biggest preachers of Ryan Singer's Shape Up, which was developed at Basecamp. So super interesting. But before we start with that, like maybe a few words about like your personal, the nerd in you. Like why did you get there? Like why are you fascinated by computers? What initially sparked your attention, and why you're doing what you're doing?
So basically I have a computer since I can write. So I got one from my father, I think in the first or second class of elementary school. And then I was typing all the listings from the magazines, that I have some games there, because buying games was very expensive for me. And so I just typed all the listings and for days and weeks until I had my games. And then I played games on my Schneider computer back then. And basically I'm living and breathing computers since I can remember. And then in my teenage years, I got my first Pentium 3 with Windows. And and basically I'm on every school I went, I redid the school homepage. I was very early in touch with the web technologies, built up communities from scratch. I had a brief moment where I was not programming that much. This was during my, let's say, late adolescence, when I was playing World of Warcraft a lot. But even World of Warcraft gave me something. And basically, this was the management of remote teams, because in World of Warcraft, you need to coordinate 40 people at this time, and everybody needs to be online at the same time, and everybody needs to be prepared. So this gave me a lot for the management of remote teams. Actually, the team at Edding is remote, and my last team was also remote. And and then afterwards, I studied software engineering, and directly after software engineering, I founded my first company. This was in 2010. Then it was a social media agency. We were basically the first company in Germany that was building Facebook apps. Back then, 2010, 2011, Facebook apps were all the hype, and we grew very fast, just out of the cash flow, because everybody wanted Facebook apps, wanted to have raffles, sweepstakes, but also bigger games. We developed back then with Flash. And this was my first company. And then I was I was CTO since my first company. In my second company, I was CTO and CPO. Back then, we did not say CPTO, but basically this was my role. Because in my first company, I learned, the projects, they never fail because of the tech. They fail because we were doing the wrong thing. So I was very motivated in my second company to also take over this product part. And I was also very motivated that it's not agency work for clients, that you could really have a saying in the product strategy. And this company, it was a B2B marketplace where brands can collaborate with social media influencers, book them for campaigns and those kind of things. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And when did you switch from, anecdote from yesterday's prep call, give me a ticket, to let me build the team that solves the problem?
Yeah, it was basically in the stint after this. But I'm fascinated with the problem how engineers and designers collaborate Back then, in the agency world, there was no product manager, but how they are collaborate. And I thought back then it's a matter of tools, and we tried out a lot of tools that let designers directly produce HTML, so for easier handover to the developers and so on. But then at one point, it was while I was building up an IoT business unit for the industrial company Voigt, when I realized, after reading Shape Up, it's really a process and a communication and collaboration topic, and not just a pure tool topic. And then I tried out Shape Up in this setting, and we first tried it out with half of the team and then the other half of the team. And Shape Up is a method where you work for 6 weeks uninterrupted in one topic. And if the whole team had this experience working 6 weeks, interdisciplinary on one goal, together in 2 to 3 people, then it's a very easy sell to change the whole process, because everybody likes working like this. And so I got even more fascinated by this whole topic of how are silos created and how to get rid of them. And basically it became one of my main topics until today.
Because almost all teams out there have silos.
You can have silos in the smallest teams. You can have silos with 3 or 4 people, if they are thinking about the work in the wrong way. Yeah.
And is there? Do you have like a trick of how to make people wake up? Is there like a cheat somewhere that you often use?
I mean, at the end, it's, for me, I try that they come up with some ideas on their own. I mean, in general, I try to be very vulnerable publicly when I lead a team, because I give some framework, some boundaries to a team, but often they are not completely perfect. And when, for example, the role of the designer is one of the hardest, and when you get rid of silos, because designers love to do 30, 40 Figma screens and hand everything over so that everything makes sense. And process-wise, they need to do this to a certain degree, because they can't make some decisions before they don't know what else is there. But for example, especially with designers, when they say, it does not work for me and this is shit, or then when they come up with a better idea, then I'm very, and try to be very publicly vulnerable that this was not the perfect process, but it was a starting point for continuous improvement. And I thank them that they corrected me, and I try to be very open on these topics.
And what's, from your perspective, the earliest tell you're in assembly line mode? Like language meetings, Jira smells, anything that, like, if you look into a team, that makes you realize I'm in the wrong movie here?
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest signs is when you need to do trade-offs because the time is running out. And then if you do trade-offs because the time is running out, most of the times the trade-offs are then done or led by the engineers, because we don't have time to complete this feature. And when those trade-offs at the end are made, then it means the team has not made trade-offs early enough on a strategic level, and this means they are not collaborating together on a strategic level enough.
So that means that they are in the they are just working on their ticket basically,
exactly, yeah.
and not so much thinking about the big picture.
Yeah.
I also remember a few moments when I heard "give me a ticket."
Yeah, I mean,
which is
even if everybody would work like this, and like in IT support, everybody is just working on tickets when we are developing product. I imagine this world you're working away very blissfully, 8 hours a day, ticket after ticket, and you go home very happy. But the reality is different, because today you cannot implement a single ticket in product development without disturbing 5 other people via Slack and interrupt them while they are doing their work, or you got interrupted from others because they need some API documentation or some requirements are not clear. So even tickets alone, they don't help us. And then if you're out of time and you're just worked on tickets and not really together on a higher level, how to make the right trade-offs at the right time, then the engineers make the trade-offs at the end, and you end not up with and those trade-offs are not the right ones in the most cases.
So what then makes you happy is if you see like a table as big as this one, with, I don't know, 4 people around it who work for 4 weeks or 6 weeks on one problem that they try to solve together.
Yeah. Basically, I'm always happy if I don't see more than 4 people working at the same thing at the same time, because it only gets more complicated. And I think the real key is to decide who are the right set of 2 to 3 people to work on what topic at the same time. Because I mean, you have more strategic topics where you want to have the more senior people together making those decisions. But then you have the implementation part, and where you can give a team more freedom if your strategic boundaries are defined correctly. And I always try to optimize for this set of the right 2 to 3 people to make decisions.
But isn't it also a bit about the people that you deal with? Like, I mean, I know many people that want to have impact urgently, and others that maybe care more about the infrastructure they are operating. Isn't that like at first a people question, and secondly only like a question of management style and org setup?
It's a skill question, first of all, because if I try to bring together on one table the senior designer, the senior product manager, and the senior engineer, then I need an engineer who really knows the code base, not somebody who is a general techie and a good engineer. It could even be a good engineer, but if he has not knowledge of the concrete code base, then it does not help. For example, if you shape projects like in Shape Up, then you really want to have the most senior people there. But it's also a character thing. Not everybody wants to collaborate on this level, but I feel most people who want to have an impact and who are good engineers, they want to have a say in what they are building at the end of the day. And some others maybe need some more time until they get to this point. Maybe some of them get never to this point, but I must also say during the implementation phase, for example, in Shape Up, if you work together for 6 weeks, 2 to 3 people, then it also helps sometimes more shy people to get out of their comfort zone, because if they are not escalating something, then they are on their own. And so I have seen cases where also shy engineers are helping, for example, directly with a customer, getting access to this beta feature and those kind of things, stuff that they would have not done otherwise if they are in a bigger setting. So if you reduce the team size, then everybody has less room to specialize and need to do also other things. And I think we are seeing a general trend towards specialization nowadays in setups where fewer and fewer engineers can do more and more things.
Yeah, there's a slight trend towards also smaller teams, right? Also with AI being around. But isn't then the initial idea of Agile for many companies that's either Kanban or Scrum a misconception, because, or like not in line with how software should be built, because it's basically borrowed from automotive industry and production lines?
I mean, the original manifesto of Agile software development, they had the right things in mind. So individuals, interactions, working software, collaboration, responding to change, those were the right things. But the people who created this manifesto, those were developers. And at one point, business took over and business tried to make it work for the business. And so they come up with Scrum. Basically, Scrum is a set of business practices. Scrum is not a set of development practices like all this planning game, small releases, and so on. Basically, those are business practices and not developer practices.
How does then like your ideal idea derive from that? What do you do early then if you enter a company, if you consult a team, if you build up a new team? What's the first thing for you to do, and how do you make sure that people work on the right objectives ultimately?
Yeah, I mean, figuring out the right objectives is the first thing that you normally need to do. But in general, I try to bring in a mindset of differentiating between different things. I want people, everybody, the whole senior management, but also the people inside of the product team to be very clear. Are we talking now about what objectives we want to achieve? And for me, there's only one objective at the same time and not a list. It's really one objective at the same time. It's a very easy rule, but it's the hardest rule to follow in a lot of companies. But really bring in I try to force rank the objectives so that I force the people to, for example, if it's coming from senior management, the rest of the senior management, I really try to make them a prioritized list. Are we now focusing on engagement or on growth? Are we now trying to prove if our product works for customer, or are we trying to prove that we can make an impact with our product or that we can sell it? I mean, those are all different objectives, and I really try to focus the whole team on one objective at a time. And when you focus on one objective at a time, then you can think about how are you slicing the problems this team is working on. And here I try to differentiate talking about problems differently from talking about solutions, because it's two different things. If your problem is clearly defined, you can come up with a whole set of solutions. But if you start with a solution, you're very limited, and you cannot. You don't have the freedom in your mind and in your discussion culture that you're first focusing on the problem. So if you have the objective, I try to focus on the problem. And this is very strongly inspired from Shape Up, where you need to have a framing before you go into the shaping phase. The framing is, what is the problem? And this is just 2 paragraphs. Basically, what is the current context and what is the desired outcome we want to achieve? And I try to narrow down everybody on this before we are talking about solutions. And this is also if you think on classical strategy work, like good strategy, bad strategy template, it's the same. Like you want to have your current context very clearly. So the customer is in this situation, the product is in this situation, the business is in that situation. And then you want to have basically a desired outcome, like without talking about a solution. And this is the challenge here. And Shape Up does a very good job, and Ryan Singer especially, in explaining this. Talking about the desired outcome, like what is the outcome and not the output. What does the customer want to achieve in this phase? And if you're talking about problems, also inspired by Shape Up, you should talk about how much you want to invest in this problem. Like, what is your appetite? Because if you say, if you have the problem separate from the solution, then you can have a discussion. We are interested in investing 1 week or in investing 6 weeks in solving this problem. What is it worth to us? This is a very important discussion to have, and establishing this culture of separating the problems and talking about what it is worth to solving this problem or proving this hypothesis. This is the most important thing on the top level.
So double revenue next year.
Yeah. And we need to come up with a set of problems that is hindering us with that. And then we can basically make, at the end, doubling the revenue is not purely an engineering problem, but we can, from the engineering side, we can come up with problems in this space, and then we can discuss how much is it worth to us. And then it's also pretty easy to talk about business-wise, is it worth to us investing this time or this resources in it? You can, some companies are very keen into ROI calculation before they do product initiatives. And if you have differentiated the problem from the amount of resources you're investing, you can have an easier calculation if it's worth to you.
Right. And also easier for the people that are supposed to solve the problem to understand the room of possibilities, basically, yeah. Right? Or the zone of possible solutions. Because like if you can invest €1 to double the revenue, it might not work out, right?
Exactly, yeah. And then when you're talking about solutions and the team knows how much the team can invest, then you have a different set of solutions. Maybe you have a rough buying decision, or you have a more expensive building decision, or you just say, we prototype something first, and then when we are in the solution space, I try to teach the teams an approach that they can always stop the project after the time box is over. This is very important, that you try to identify the unknowns first, but only the unknowns that are really necessary to solve. And yeah, when we approach such a project, then we are always doing a scope map. It means all the scopes of the project. This could be 5, 6, 7 scopes, and then I play the devil's advocate, and I say, can we cut the project after this time? Can we cut the project then? Can we cut the project then? To really identify in our scopes map, are we starting with the right scopes in the implementation phase? Because if you cannot cut something that's at the end, then it needs to be at the beginning. Basically the idea is to just start with the most important thing and not end up with a scope map that is, for example, like a bad example would be prepare all of the API, prepare all of the design, next step, bring everything together. This is not a good scope map. A single scope is something that could be developed and shipped individually. Maybe not released, maybe it's behind the feature flag, but the whole team can work on the same thing at the same time. Basically, also a shape-up principle. And I just try to bring the team in this mindset by always asking, can we cut here and here and here? And in reality, the halfway through the project, we maybe identify other scopes, and we may reprioritize, or we change the scopes. This can still happen. This is still part of the flexibility. It's not about making a fixed plan here, but just establishing this mindset of constant reprioritization. Also finishing one scope and not gold plating things, but really saying, we don't really need to do this now because we have all the rest of the project. Is also a very important mindset that such a team needs to go into. And the mindset is harder if you work with tickets, because then you have all the tickets and you see all the work. I have setups where we work for feature development completely without tickets. It's unimaginable maybe for some people, but especially if you have more senior people, everybody is, you can trust everybody that he or she organizes him or herself. Then everybody after the daily goes back to their work setting with their own to-dos because they know what to do until they meet for the next time. This is also possible. You can also work with tickets, but in a way that tickets emerge organically, like while the team is working on it, they create the tickets. It's not like a product manager is creating all the tickets and then they work on the tickets. I mean, with a basic Kanban 3-column setup, you can also work in this way if the people are less organized. But then you really need to be very, you always need to ask the question, are we working on the most important thing? Because at the point that you have tickets, people just want to make the tickets reality, make the check mark, done. And
yeah, right. Move stuff from A to B,
exactly,
right?
Yeah.
That's
it's
like
rewarding. It's giving all the dopamine in the brain and things, but it's more important to really ask the question, are we working on the most important thing? And sometimes I'm tired about asking this question all the time, but you need to repeat this question all the time, at least for the first half of a year, when the team starts working in this more free way of working.
So you ask that in every daily?
Basically, I'm nowadays I'm not in every daily, but I try to be there once or twice a week, basically just to ask this question.
Okay. Cool. And then, having like breakpoints after every iteration, then means like potentially discontinuing or being able to discontinue after 6 weeks. So do you always hold to those 6 weeks, or how does that typically look like? Or do you often also just cancel because you think like, hey, what we're doing here is rubbish?
No, cancellation does happen very rarely in my experience. At the beginning, when a team starts and they're not that good in holding on to the time box, we extend the time box by a week, by 3 days or whatever. But then at one point, maybe after half a year, after a couple of such cycles, you can be more strict in the team. Because if the team had experienced 1 or 2 times that they cannot ship everything they have planned on scopes, then they really understand that we need to reprioritize the scopes all the time. So at the beginning, I tend to be a little bit loose, just that everybody understands the workflow, and then later you can be more strict when the team had their first failures, basically.
But aren't you always in those 6 weeks, and they're mostly then like an engineer, a designer, and a product person in a room? Like, is there like enough of the initial objective flowing in again? Like, or how do you make sure that like this is all connected? That like objectives are connected to problems, to solutions and delivery?
I mean, the problem needs to be connected to the objective. This is one of those critical points of the product manager. The product manager is responsible for the customer value and for the business viability risk. So is the problem we are defining, is there something that where we provide customers value, and does it work for the business? And so the product manager is responsible for making this connection. Are we paying? Is there something that's working for the objective? And then if the problem definition is good, then the product manager is also responsible that the problem definition is resolved by the solution at the end. So the product manager is the bridging function here.
So the product manager then talks to like the business owner and makes sure that this like it's actually happening.
Exactly.
Or
it depends always on the size of the organizations and how are you doing this. I try to think of, I mean, the objectives needs to be designed on, needs to be agreed on the highest level. And then you have this next level of implementation where you talk about the problems. This is then the next level, also in the hierarchy. And then you talk about the solutions, and you can basically imagine it like a company hierarchy with different people involved. In the best case, there's always the same trifecta. You have a designer on the top level, you have a product manager on the top, product person on the top level, and you have an engineer on the top level, like the CTO, CPO. Design, in reality, often there's not a chief design officer in the most companies that I worked with. So then somebody needs to also take over this role. For example, in a CPTO setting, then this is also taken over by the CPTO. If there's CPO and the CTO, then most of the time the design, and as I have seen it, is then taken over by the product officer. But you need to have those functions on a different level. And I try to think in roles, and one role can be held by multiple roles can be held by one person, but it's just important that you do not forget those roles. Yeah.
How important is Conway's law in this equation? Like, how a hierarchy is typically designed here?
Yeah, I mean, Conway's law, to repeat it maybe for the listeners, says that organizations that design systems produce designs that mirror their communication structures. So if you always work together in teams of 2 to 3 people, for defining the problems, how you are slicing the problems, or when you're implementing the problems, then it's very important that the people who are doing the slicing of the problems keep this principle in mind. Because in an ideal way, and if you in synergy with your architecture, you are able to work on a couple of things in parallel without the actual solution has a dependency on each other. Because if the implementing teams that are implementing the solution have a dependency on each other, then they are not autonomous anymore, and then they're losing a lot of the advantage of working in a small team. So it's very important that the architecture, but also the slicing of the problems, keeps this in mind, this principle. And then if you have basically an empowered product team that can work in this way, it's pretty easy steering this team, because you just you align this team, the seniors of this team, on your objectives, and in the best way they do discovery and what problems to solve and how to solve them with what solutions. And yeah, with Conway's law and designing teams, it's also important that you really optimize those teams for value streams, like team topologies basics from Matthew Skelton, that you don't have a lot of handovers between teams, but that you really took all the capabilities that a team needs to work on a certain product or on a certain domain in one team. And then it's a question of who's working on what solution within this team. But you really want to avoid, for example, to solve one problem, that you need to go to 3 or 4 different teams. This is very important if you're thinking about the organization design.
And regarding organization design, like I saw many setups that were like not really functioning because there were, like, for example, people from 2 different orgs involved, matrix structures, etc. Like, does that like immediately ring an alarm bell if you see something like that? If you wanna connect like 2 different teams to work on the same thing, or to solve to walk towards one direction, do you then like encourage directly to change the whole reporting structure?
I would never change the whole reporting structure at once. If I would face such a situation, I think I would try to form one temporary team that is then, but that one temporary team that is stream aligned, that had basically everybody who is needed to do this will be in one team. Maybe if it's just for a temporary amount of time, maybe this is a starting point for restructuring if this happens more often. But yeah, this is then probably a little bit more, this probably needs to be aligned very goodly on the product side, and then bringing the right people together. But I would put them in a separate team if the scope is reasonably big. Like if you have just one dependency once, then maybe it does not make sense. But always bring together the people and let them own this topic together. I think this is the important thing.
What would be like for I mean, many of my listeners, they I think they are in traditional agile setups, meaning waterfall setups, mini waterfall setups. What would be your recommendation for my listeners of how to I mean, you described how to realize that, like, hey, give me a ticket, but also how to change it or how to try out something different, besides booking you as a consultant. What would be your recommendation of the first things to do and the first steps to walk alone, maybe?
I would always try to do experiments, because if you do an experiment, nobody is saying something against it. I would never say, we change everything. I would say now we limit us to just thinking about the next 6 weeks, and we don't think about what is further down the line. If you want to change something on the process, I can just recommend, like I did, trying it out with half of the team. Like in this setting, we kept our Scrum as a baseline, as a sign to every stakeholder. Nothing is changing here. We're just doing an experiment with a part of the team. And then this team works in ShapeUp, for example. And then the other team works in ShapeUp. And as I said, if then the whole team has experienced working on one thing at one time for 6 weeks, then it's an easy sell for the team. And then it was more a question of how we are doing it. But this is when you want to change the process, but you can always try to implement this thinking of, now are we very clear about objectives we are solving or problems we are solving or solutions? Like, I think probably talking about the problem first before you talk about the solution is probably a good power move for every manager, because then you can really find out, are they understanding the problem? You can talk about with them, are we solving the right problem? And then really decoupling those kind of things is something that it cannot harm, and it's really an important thing to cultivate in the mindset. Are we talking about a solution or a problem now?
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I think that just realizing, hey, you're in solution space too quickly,
exactly, yeah.
often is something that really helps engineers, right?
And it's okay to admit this. It's always okay to say, yeah, this is solution space, but now let's find out what problem are we actually solving, and then really checking, is this the problem we want to solve? And things are coming from both directions. Things are coming from the customer value side. Things can also come from the engineering side. But then you need to invest this additional step in really defining what problem it is that we want to solve before we implement this feature or new system or whatever.
The right format to do this. I'm curious what you think is the right format, because if you go into like modern orgs and let's say you have a remote first organization, then there is Jira, then there is potentially Notion or Confluence, and then there's maybe Google Meet and I don't know, Miro, if you will. And I think many companies fall into the trap of like just following their systems, right? And you initially said like, hey, it's not about tools, but often like the tools really also design the workflow in a way, right? Or like dictate the workflow maybe more. How do you escape from that? And
I mean, if I'm joining a new organization, then I always start. If the objectives are clear, then and then for the implementation with the team, I start with the problem definition, and then I give my template for problem definition, which is roughly a framing template from ShapeUp. Like, what is our current context? What is our desired outcome? This then I give the product manager and say, let's start here. Let's first define what is our starting point. What should change afterwards. And this is the first thing. And normally I'm doing this in Confluence or in written form. Could also be, if it's a Google Docs heavy company, could also be Google Doc. But it's a written thing for me. It's a text document when people can collaborate on it. With such a framing, I can go to the CEO or to other senior management stakeholders, maybe sales or whatever, and they quickly understand this is what we're trying to achieve. And then I also put an appetite there from Shape Up, like this is the amount we want to invest. And then they have a good, and this is not more than one page of paper. It's really a high level, really condensed thing. And yeah, I start in the written tools with this. And the other tools, designing the solutions, is often in Miro, because you need to collaborate more. I think it's very important if you're designing a solution that everybody is starting on a blank slate. This is really a habit of product manager. It's hard to get rid of, but don't prepare anything if you go into a shaping session or discussing about the solution, because for me it's important that all three parts, design, product, and engineering, are really starting on a blank sheet of paper, because only then the whole team owns this solution. If the product manager produces too much, then it's often people just stop thinking, and me included when I was just implementing things. If somebody brings something to me, then I nod, yes, this works, maybe not, but I'm not really owning it. I'm just implementing it at the end of the day. So another thing people can just try out is let their team start on a blank slate and let them collaborate on a high level. Because Miro, everybody can use Miro, can add a sticky, can draw an arrow. You don't need Figma to discuss product requirements. And you don't need a whole product requirements doc. You just need a framing, and then you let people collaborate, and always with this time frame in mind. And then at one point you try to let them come up with a plan, with a scope map, how they want to tackle it. And then you can challenge it if it makes sense, and you have a rough understanding. Will this, what we're implementing here, also really solve our problem, and can also challenge this?
How long does that typically take until you really start, after like having the shaping session initially, until you really start like delivering?
No, it depends. At the beginning, the shaping sessions are always longer because normally at the beginning, also the team is new. Yeah, it depends also a little bit if the team is new. In the Edding context, the team was growing, and we introduced the method. So the shaping sessions were very long, talking about 2 to 3 hours, maybe 5 sessions, distributed over 2 or 3 weeks. But then at the end, you be faster, and the shaping sessions are 1 to 2 hours, 2 to 3 sessions, and you can do it within a week. So yeah, it depends. At the beginning, I try to give some flexibility there before we start, but I really try to enforce the time box when we end, because this is also important for the expectation management with the rest of the company. So at one point, they should know in 6 weeks we have something that is roughly this. So sales and marketing can already prepare and align. And as closer as we get, maybe even if we need to delay it for 1 or 2 weeks, then we even know, at least we know more concrete what it is that we are delivering to them.
When you did your A/B tests and your experiments or experimental changes of the structure, how did you measure success ultimately, or how would you recommend to measure success of such an initiative ultimately? Is it an increase in outcome or impact, or is it just happier people?
Happier people is one of the things, definitely. I do regular do regular surveys with the team if they're happy, if they are feeling their opinion counts, and some other things. But it's also, for me, a successful initiative is when the team reprioritized. Basically, this is what I'm measuring my personal success. If the team is not just implementing what they were provided by one person, but if they're really reprioritizing and knowing how to, if they're reprioritizing, this is my most important goal. If they are doing it, then I'm happy, and then I feel I've changed something. And this closing the loop to working agile, this is basically what agile is about. Agile, for me, it means always delivering the most value. And this framework, like working in time boxes and constantly reprioritizing on what we are working, this is basically, you could argue the time boxes, you don't need the time boxes to work agile, but it just helps to implement it. It gives a cadence to the whole company. Sales knows when something is ready. If you have a couple of teams in parallel, your planning process just makes sense because every team is owning at the same time, and the resources are free for the next cycle.
That all makes absolute sense. And a lot of like beefy content for my listeners. And we slowly have to come to the end here. And like I typically ask my little surprise question here, where I thought like where can I send you into your past? Well, I thought about your very short step at IBM, because you were acting as developer back in the days, and I think you had that moment when you might have realized that you better start optimizing for outcome and impact. I don't know if it was at that time. I guess not.
It was an internship back then, basically.
Yeah. So much earlier, I guess. So if we would now have that crazy machine that would send us back to the year 2009, where you worked as full stack engineer at IBM Deutschland, and you now had the chance to whisper something into your young intern ears, what would you say? How would you wake up yourself?
First of all, I would not change anything, because I think you need to do all those errors and mistakes and have all the experiences that you end up with the same end result. But I think if I use this as a chance to summarize everything on a human level for somebody who's just starting out with those things, then I would say don't stress yourself about having all of the answers. Like, focus really on facilitation of shared learning for the whole team, because sometimes you, especially as a leader, then need to take a step back and let the team gather their own experiences, and rather think about how can you facilitate learning for your team and not doing everything for yourself.
Let others learn. Don't micromanage.
Exactly, yeah. Sometimes it's less fun than doing the things by yourself, and it does not feel that efficient, and it does not give you the dopamine hits. But then it's just a sign that you maybe need to find other projects where you can do it on yourself. But this is not the job for a senior leader, in my opinion.
Where do you get your dopamine from?
I get my dopamine from various side projects, trying out AI, ML models for all kind of new projects I'm doing at the site in my private life, or also in project context.
Home automation stuff, etc.
Oh, it's more about, at the moment, it's more about automated PDF generation, creating photo books from vacations or from the family, and having nice layouts where all the pictures fit perfectly without using one of the builders where you need to move every picture somewhere. This is where I try to optimize at the moment.
Okay. PDF is the new Flash for you then.
PDF is sadly the standard if you want to print something.
Unfortunately, yes. So Klaus, thanks a lot for your time. It was really a pleasure talking to you, and have a great day and see you soon.
Thank you. You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the AlphaList podcast. If you liked this episode, share it with friends. I'm sure they love it too. Make sure to subscribe so you can hear deep insights into technical leadership and technology trends as they become available. Also, please tell us if there is a topic you would like to hear more about or a technical leader whose brain you would like us to pick. AlphaList is all about helping CTOs getting access to the insights they need to make the best decisions for their company. Please send us suggestions to cto@alphalist.com. Send me a message on LinkedIn or Twitter. After all, the more knowledge we bring to CTOs, the more growth we see in tech. Or, as we say on AlphaList, accumulated knowledge to accelerate growth. See you in the next episode.
Dieser Podcast wird produziert von Podstars bei OMR.